Mr. President, this is your first trip to Romania as President of the United Nations General Assembly.
Indeed. Yeah, not my first visit to Romania, but first time as a President of the United Nations General Assembly.
What is the purpose of your first visit here as President of the United Nations General Assembly?
I was invited by the President of Romania, and I gladly accepted this invitation. I was honored to be awarded the honoris causa doctorate from the National School of Political Science and Public Administration. And as a part of my program, I also have meetings with the Prime Minister of Romania and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania.
You held your lectio prima earlier today. What did you address to the Romanian students?
I dedicated my address to the issue of multilateralism, and I tried to make a strong appeal in support of multilateralism, because multilateralism means that we have a system of institutions, we have a system of norms. We have built this system after the Second World War to make sure that this catastrophe will never be repeated. But right now this system is being challenged, questioned, and it's under erosion. So I stress the importance to stand up and in support and in defense of multilateralism.
You have been President of the United Nations General Assembly for the last 9 months. What are your achievements so far, and what did you learn?
It has been a great honor for me to serve as a President of the United Nations General Assembly. My overarching principle of my presidency is focusing on people. That means to make sure that what we do at the United Nations is understood and supported by the people of this planet, to make sure that the issues that we deal with are their problems. I'm also trying to promote multilateralism and to promote the role of the United Nations as the core of multilateralism. I've also focused on peace and especially the prevention of conflicts. I've organized a big event dedicated to this issue in April. I've been promoting Sustainable Development Goals agenda. I've been assisting the Secretary General in promoting reforms of the United Nations, and we are also working, and we still do, on a document which is called the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration, which will be the first ever international framework addressing the issue of migration. The
migration is a very big problem for Europe in this moment.
Indeed. Europeans see it as a problem. The rest of the world see it as a fact, as a reality, because the migration has always been here and it's not going to go anywhere. Migration is not only the flows of people towards Europe. Majority of migration flows are happening in the global south, within the African continent. And the philosophy behind the attempt to adopt this global compact is that we are not going to say that whether migration is good or bad. We are going to accept that migration is a reality, and also to understand the fact that up until now we are unable to govern, to manage migration. We are reacting. But with this document we will try to agree on one philosophy of what migration is, try to harness the positive sides of migration and mitigate the negative sides of migration. This document will be of political nature. It will not be a legally binding document, yet we expect that the national governments will adopt the principles of this document and incorporate in their national legislation.
You are a Slovak citizen from a European country. Is this position in the United Nations hierarchy traditionally granted to a country in Central and Eastern Europe?
No, it is not. This is the position that rotates among all the countries of the world. In the General Assembly there are 5 regional groups, and they rotate. So that means Slovakia, same as Romania, is a member of a so-called Eastern European group, and we have the right to present or to propose a President of the General Assembly from among our group once in 5 years. I was endorsed. That means I had a unanimous support of my regional group. In other cases, there is a competition between several candidates but always from the same group.
So you were supported by Romania also?
I was supported by Romania, and I have been supported by Romania also in my many activities, and I'm very grateful to Romania for that.
You have come to international politics as an envoy of Javier Solana, as an observer at the Montenegro referendum in 2005. What do you remember from this appointment? I read a story on the internet, and that's the reason I am asking you that question.
I think I was more than an observer, because Javier Solana sent me there to organize, to invent the referendum, and he gave me a very short and very clear instruction. He said, make sure it will be credible, it will not be disputed. I don't care about the outcome, but I really care about the process. And we had to invent the process. So I had to consult with the local partners, with the international partners. We invented and I proposed a unique formula, which was for the referendum on independence to be valid, it required 55% of all those who participated in the referendum. And this was based on a very, very careful calculation, and of course a study of previous voting patterns in Montenegro. And this was, the 55% was very difficult for both camps, but not impossible to achieve. They didn't like it very much, but they accepted it. In the end, the result of the referendum was 55.5% in favor of independence. We had 86.2% turnout, so the legitimacy could not be questioned. And of course, thanks to this process, which was under European Union supervision, with the participation of everybody, the results were never questioned, and Montenegro was immediately accepted into the United Nations, other international organizations, and today Montenegro is the most advanced country of the Western Balkans when it comes to the European integration. So for me, the Montenegrin independence referendum and the process was a successful example of the European Union's preventive diplomacy.
That was the beginning of your international career.
Yes, I think so.
What is the significance of the United Nations at this moment? The wars in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, the wave of immigrants coming to Europe could have found a solution through negotiations under the umbrella of United Nations, and yet that's not the case. Why?
United Nations is a huge undertaking, 6 principal organs, but the truth is that the world's public usually looks at the United Nations through the work of the Security Council. And every time Security Council is blocked and is unable to adopt a common position, it is seen as a failure of the system. But this is not completely fair, because the United Nations is doing extremely important work when it comes to peacekeeping, when it comes to development, when it comes to protection of human rights. And the General Assembly is the unique body because this is the only organ of the United Nations where all 193 countries are members, and they have exactly the equal status, equal rights, equal number of seats in the whole. And the General Assembly is trying to be helpful, and several times General Assembly has stepped in and took the issues from the Security Council and tried to address them. General Assembly cannot adopt the legally binding decisions like the Security Council, but the political weight of a decision that is adopted by 193 countries is very high. So I would suggest that we look at the work of the United Nations more complex, not only on mistakes or flaws, but also on its achievements. Plus, let us not forget the United Nations is an organization that is made up of member states. And it can only be as successful and as efficient as the member state allowed the United Nations to be. So we shall ask ourselves why we do not let the United Nations to be more efficient.
On June last year, Romania officially launched its official campaign to obtain a non-permanent membership mandate in the United Nations Security Council. And it's running against Estonia for the only position allocated to Eastern Europe. The elections will take place in June next year. How do you see the role of Romania in the United Nations?
Romania is a very active and highly respected member of the United Nations. I would like to highlight in particular Romania's support for multilateralism, Romania's very active participation in peacekeeping operations. Romania is among the most active members when it comes to peacekeeping. Romanian permanent representative in New York is currently chairing the Peacebuilding Commission, and he was also elected the chair of the first committee on political issue for the next General Assembly session. There are 6 committees. So Romania's role is very visible, very constructive. And when it comes to the campaign, I am a president of 193 member states, so I wish the campaign to be fair, and that's all I can say.
How many countries have expressed their intention to move their embassy to Jerusalem until now? Only the number.
Again, this is an issue that I don't want to comment on because this falls within the sovereign responsibility of member states, but I would like to remind ourselves that there are several resolutions of the General Assembly and also of the Security Council that are defining the status of Jerusalem, and that are also saying that it should be decided in the direct dialogue between the Israeli and Palestinian side, and it should be a result of their negotiations. So the status of Jerusalem should come at the end of the process that is based on bilateral talks between the Israelis and Palestinians.
What role could the United Nations play in the nuclear agreement with Iran that the United States denounced? It's also a sensitive subject in the region.
United Nations supported the process. We have seen the signing of this agreement as a victory for diplomacy and as a clear proof that you can solve difficult problems through diplomatic negotiations. And the Security Council unanimously adopted this document and made it a Security Council resolution. That means it's a piece of international law. So this is the strongest support the United Nations can express.
How much are the United Nations involved in the negotiations in Syria?
Of course, the Syrian situation is very much on the United Nations agenda. Let me remind you that the main negotiating platform, the so-called Geneva process, is led by the Secretary General Special Envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura. So that means United Nations is in the lead of the diplomatic efforts. Syria is very often on the agenda of the Security Council, but also General Assembly is active, and last year it established a special mechanism for investigation of atrocities and crimes against humanity, and has helped to establish the system. And a few weeks ago we heard the first report of the special prosecutor about the work of this commission.
Mr. President, the last question. What are the most pressing topics in the world currently on the United Nations agenda?
There are many. There is a need for peace in many parts of the world. There is a need for sustainable development because we see progress, but this progress is uneven. There is a need for universal understanding and support for human dignity and human rights. And in general, there is a need to protect and uphold the multilateralism system of norms and international organizations that we established to save the world from future wars with the United Nations as its heart.
Mr. President, thank you very much for the interview and success in your job.
Thank you very much.